Because I said that the issue really is an issue of returning to the land. And returning to the land is a crucial thing. And I want to explain that in a minute. Um, the 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 reality is that every nation has its place, and the land of Israel is in the center of the land. It's called the Middle East because really it's in the middle. If you look at the reason why there was historically so much issues because it was the point that connected to Asia Minor, to Africa, to Europe. It was always the point, the nexus. It was the center point in the world. That's not an accident. Mystically, that means everything comes out from the Holy Land, and it says that there's like a point. Every land will benefit from the land of Israel, and even so much so that it says in the future the whole world's like the land of Israel, and the land of Israel is like Jerusalem because the holiness comes out from there. It's very important that the Jewish people return to the land of Israel, because from there the blessing goes out to the entire world. And so we're learning the story of Nehemiah, and I think we're up to the second chapter, and it really is a fascinating difference when you read Nehemiah than when you read the story of the 5 books of the Torah. And I pointed this out when we were doing Ezra also, but it's just really behooves us to understand this. In the book of the Torah, when you read the 5 books of the Torah, you see things are miraculous. They're miraculous. Moses, the Red Sea, splits the Red Sea. That was a certain time that God wanted to reveal himself in a clear way. What's happening in the story of Nehemiah, easing us into modern day times, is God conceals himself. And he works through the forces that he created of nature. Now, I said this to you before, but it's crucial to understand this. Nature is in a certain way can mislead you, can give you an illusion. I thought about it before, but I want to explain it again. So let's say, for example, a person sees, you put a seed in the ground and it starts to grow. And they say, wow, how did that happen? Oh, Mother Nature, which is absurd because whose mother's here is named Nature, right? What do you mean, Mother Nature? No. But what happens is nature, since it happens on a constant way, on a constant basis, you get deluded into thinking that it has its own power. That's a problem. That's why I explained to you many times the numerical value of the name nature, Hateva, and the name Elohim, the name of God that controls all of the process of the world, is the same numerical value of 86. The reason is because you can look at nature and you can get lost and think it's its own power, God forbid, and not see that it's God moving the world in the way he wants on a steady basis. So miracles, when God reveals at one time, nature is God's will that happens on a constant basis, but it has the problem that you can get lost and think it's just a natural process. And that's the whole story we're up to in Nehemiah, because it really looks like, the story seems to be that they have this problem, that problem. You don't see the same stories of the miracles in the 5 books. And the reason is because we're moving into this world that God wants us to find him in the hidden miracles of our lives. And that's why I wanted to learn this book, because it's happening right now in terms of so many of the political things that are cooking that you don't always see. Why is this happening? How is this happening? What's really going on? Because you don't see clear miracles. And that's what we're up to in Nehemiah. So I want to continue up chapter 2. And I want to continue a little bit to understand this in light of the world and its political situations that are happening, that if you look closely, you'll see God running the show. And if you don't, you're going to be like, well, what the heck is going on here? Because the stories in the news get crazier and crazier by the day. All right, so we are up to the second chapter. In the second chapter, we said the first chapter, Nehemiah heard that things were going bad in the land of Israel. Jews had gone back, and they had built the temple, But they did not build a wall around the city, and the enemies were attacking them constantly. Okay? And when he heard how bad it was for the people, he was very upset. Now, in verse 1, chapter 2, so in the month of Nisan, which is the first month of Jewish calendar, in the 20th year to the king, he was the wine, what do you call it? The butler. He was the one serving the wine to the king. Okay? And it says there, his face never looked bad. But then, since he was so upset what happened to him, the king saw him in verse 2 and says, why is your face so bad? You're not sick. This is only a bad heart. It says Nehemiah was very afraid. What is going on here? Like, what? What is this king like? Everyone's got to walk around like, singing a happy tune. What's the story with this king? What's this about? Well, there are a few different parts to it. One is that Nehemiah was the one pouring the wine for the king. So in the old days, the way you would knock the king off if you wanted to was to poison him, right? Everyone knows that's the famous why they used to toast. The reason why they used to bang the cups against each other was that it was poison. It would shoot into the other glass, and that would be like a way the guy wouldn't want to, do a toast with you if he was trying to poison you. So what happened was, so Nehemiah is the butler. So for him to now have a bad face, that is suspicious. Things like, hey, wait a minute, what are you plotting? Why? That's one level why Nehemiah is nervous, because the king sees his face and says, hey, why you look so angry? You look so mad. Are you trying to do some kind of subterfuge over here? What's happening? Yeah, that's one. The second thing I want to tell you, which is I think is really interesting, because we talked about this king and many of these kings who are not the righteous kings of Israel. This is the king of Persia. I don't know if they were such great guys. This king, for example, Darius, the sages tell us in the beginning he was a very righteous guy. But then it says he wasn't. And later on, there's a verse that says he had his different interpretations. His queen sitting next to him, but the term that's used is the shegel. Shegel is a lustous type of. He was very lustful. So the sages say that he was already going off. He was doing things that were a little bit not so good, which happens to people that are king. If you're a king, you got to be careful. And he was not. He was originally a righteous guy, and now he wasn't. And I think that's a little bit the idea why he needed everyone smiling. Because this king, he liked a good old time. And he was becoming a kind of a gluttonous, pleasure seeker, hedonistic type of person. Because the text says that about him. It says that we'll see later on in the verse when it says he had his queen sitting next to him, but the term that's used there is a term that would indicate sort of a lustful approach to life. Maybe that's why he always wanted everyone to be smiling and happy. And now Nehemiah, either he couldn't conceal it, or the king was really good at picking out somebody who wasn't happy. It was like he needed everyone to be always happy with in front of him. So he says to Nehemiah, what's going on? Nehemiah is very nervous because the king has now called him out. So Nehemiah decides, I'm not going to go and say, no, my face is fine, because the king is either sensitive to see that he doesn't look right, or Nehemiah can't conceal it. So Nehemiah says, okay, I'll tell you what happens here. So verse 3, he says, long live the king. He says, why wouldn't my face be bad that the city, the burial ground of my forefathers is destroyed, and its walls are burnt up in smoke? So first question I have is, why is he saying that, the burial ground of my forefathers? And the answer is, some of the commentaries say, because for the Persians, that was a very important thing. It's not that it's not important to us. For the Persians, that was something that they could hear. So it is important, the burial ground, but the reason why Nehemiah points out, because he knows that's going to get the king to understand his position, that the fact that Israel is desolate right now, that's a problem. It's a terrible thing. Okay? So now in verse 4, the king says, okay, what do you want? This is very fascinating here. So kind of the point I want to get to today. In verse 4, it says, and I prayed to God of heaven. So the king says, what do you want? And it says that Nehemiah prayed. And then in verse 5, it said, I said to the king, if it's good with the king, and I found, your first servant has found favor in the king's eyes, send me to Judah, land of Israel, and let me rebuild this town, build the city. So I want to answer a question. Just what happened here? The king said, what do you want? He prayed to God, and then he starts telling the king, well, if the king is agreeable, let me go to the land of Israel and rebuild. Where was the prayer? Right? He says, I prayed to God, and then a second later, he's talking to the king. So some people understand that he prayed to God, and he prayed first, and then he asked the king. Okay, that's simple. On that approach, I want to, and I'm going to explain it in a deeper approach in a second, but in that approach, I want to just jump over to politics for a moment. Because, I was talking to my brother yesterday. Brother's a very astute, rabbi, and he understands politics very well. And I was talking to him about it. I was talking to him about this class, and I was saying to him, when you when you see the news and you say, "Oh my gosh, I really can't believe this!" Shouldn't everyone be seeing the emperor's not wearing any clothes? I mean, let's just talk about politics 1 second here. We have this case where they've found groves of documents in President Biden's thing. Okay. Besides for the claims from the FBI that he's been taking money, so what do? They indict Trump. It's if it wasn't so disastrous, it'd be comical. There was a story in the Talmud of one of the high priests who eventually later in his life he got fooled by the Sadducees, and his last statement was, the guys you got to watch out for are the hypocrites. Those are the guys you got to watch out. So what happens is here, it's you have to wonder, you feel like you're in a surrealistic movie or something. Yeah. He's taking, the Russians are thing, but then wait a minute, you got the document from the Russians. He has paper, he has the documents, but you have all more documents. Everything that they're accusing the other of, they're doing more. It's unbelievable. You look at it and you say, so you think, well, when are people going to realize? And I don't know. My brother and I had a little bit of a disagreement. I'm kind of hopeful that people are going to look at this and say, wait a minute, there's something really fishy going on, and look at the truth. But I don't know. I don't know how people are going to realize it or not realize it, because unfortunately the world is set up in a way that people don't often think, and there's a media that is, that's telling them what to think. So, but the answer really, that what you have to do is right in the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is going to make his effort, and he's going to do what he can do, and he's going to ask the king. But he's doing his spiritual component of it. Because you have to understand that even if I get frustrated about the politics is not, they are not controlling the world. God controls the world. And so therefore, make your effort, vote, try to, but the deeper thing is to realize that this is not out of control. Which most of the people here on this platform are aware and see what's going on and see that this is all one big lie. And again, I don't mean I'm not like political in the sense that Republicans or Democrats. A lot of people have a lot of crazy things on both sides. It's not that. I want Torah. I want truth. And the stuff that people are saying is not. And it's hard to even say because people like. And I said this to you a while ago, and I'm trying to avoid talking about it because people will think I'm crazy. But I think in the end, I'm going to be right. The whole Ukraine story is also a big fake. It's a big fake. I believe it's a big fake. It's bizarre. We're gonna give them money to kill. We're gonna fight to the last Ukrainian. It's barbaric. They're actually loading them to get killed, and people don't realize. People think because the media's not telling them. The reality is that I've heard that they're being killed in a much higher rate, 10 times, 7 times to 10 times the amount of Russian being killed, Ukrainians being killed. So who are you helping here? This is a big fake. It was the most corrupt country, but the media has made it. These are the good, and the other guys are the bad. I'm not saying the Russians were good at all, but this whole thing is a story, and therefore I see sometimes like Republican people saying, "No, we gotta keep." This is not the thing. I think that if they can make peace in 1 minute. They have to find a way to deal with each other. Yes, you have a whole area, that is Russian people that you're going to have to find a way that they will. You don't hear in American news, but they have been being persecuted. They weren't allowed to speak Russian. They had various things. You don't hear that. You just hear one side of the story. So on both sides of the political aisle, there are corporate reasons that people do things. There's money things they do. There's the industrial military complex. There's all that stuff. That's not it. The answer is to try to hook into truth what has to happen in all of these cases. And the reality here is that even though Nehemiah is going to ask the king in a second. He understands it's not about the king, not about that king, about the real king, God. And that's why he prays to God first, because if God wants it to move in this way, it'll move in this way. And if he doesn't, it won't. And these people who are seen to control the narrative and the world, in the end, they don't. And this is one of the deepest things, I think I shared this, it's one of the deepest things you'll ever see. Just imagine all of these characters who are the deep state, they're all doing their thing, and they're all pushing this trip. Imagine at the time, which will happen, one day you're going to see that God was directing the whole show, brought it exactly where it has to be. Jews will come back to the land of Israel. World will have peace. We'll see the truth. Well, as it says in the prophets, they won't stop. They'll stop killing each other because that's what it is. The killing each other means there's no boundary here. I want to swallow everything. When they realize that God has a plan, you have your country, you have your space, then what's going to happen is that the world will be filled of knowledge of God. And when that happens, it's going to be the most incredible thing. Let me tell you why. Because you're going to realize all the people you thought were controlling the narrative weren't. See, they were trying to do what they were doing, and God lets them do what they're doing. But in the end, he's going to bring it exactly where he wants it to be. I'll give you an example. This is an example I give in my book. I think I shared it with you once. I'll share it with you again. Imagine I go and I say to imagine there's a governor of a country, and he goes and he gives 3 parcels of land to different people, and he says the goal is that I want you to increase the economy in this land and figure out what you're going to do with your parcel of land to make it amazing. Okay, first guy goes and he plants and he has fruit trees and vegetables and great, raises the economy by bringing all of this great produce. The second one says, okay, I'm going to bring in cattle and sheep, and they're going to graze, and all milk and yogurt and all these things. Great. Does a good job. The third guy says, well, I don't like this idea. I am against this whole business of helping out the governor, and I'm going to trash the land. He has a pickaxe, and he starts beating, trashing, and trying to destroy the land. Okay, now, if the governor was all-powerful, omnipotent, what would he do? What he would do is, one example, is he'd make it that when the guy is smashing the land, trying to destroy it, he would strike oil. And all of a sudden, the oil. So what happened? The guy ended up doing the job that he was supposed to do of increasing the economy, but he's not rewarded for it because his intention was bad. But if I was all powerful, I could use the bad intention and get it where I want to go. And that's not what God does. All of these people, they are not controlling your life. So even if I'm going to complain about the politics, because you guys let me complain, and I appreciate that, I'm not really upset about it because this is great. This is great. God is running the show, and those who can see through the lie now, and this is, I guess, one of the good news about the internet is that I assume this stuff has been going on for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I don't want to say because I don't want to. But I mean, if Robert Kennedy Jr., I mean, I doubt they're going to let him win. But if he does, I hope they don't do to him what they did to. Ooh, I shouldn't say that. But he's claiming that they did something. How long has this deep state been going on? It's probably been going on for a very long time. And now all of a sudden, the emperor's not wearing any clothes, and everyone gets to see it. And some people, and they'll dig in deeper. Oh, let's change the discussion. Let's arrest Trump for something that, like, I don't know, these guys are. So it's changing the narrative so you won't think. But if we are seeing through this lie, it's not the conclusion to get angry. It's a conclusion to say, this is not where it's at. God is running the show. And that's what Nehemiah does. Nehemiah is going to ask the kings to make his effort. But it's about the prayer to God, and then I'll make my physical effort afterwards. That's what I want to get to. Now, there's another explanation what Nehemiah does, and this is amazing. This is the Malbim says. He says that this is even greater. It's the same idea, but it's even greater. He says that when Nehemiah spoke to the king, he said to him, if it's good in the king's eyes, let me go build the city. He wasn't even talking to the king. He wasn't on the King Darius. The name. He was talking to the King of Kings, talking to God. Imagine that. Imagine you're living in this world, you're functioning, you're doing what you have to do, but you realize all along it's not in this guy's power. So, this is amazing. He's talking to King Darius, Artashasta. He's talking to him, and the king, this physical flesh and blood king, thinks he's talking to him, but he's really talking to God. He's saying, "Oh, king," meaning thinking of King of Kings, let me be able to go to Jerusalem. And the king is like, "Okay," because he's not controlling the show. And that's what I want you to understand right now, because don't get too frustrated. I hope it's I really hope that people now start to say, wait a minute, these guys are phony, and this stuff is like and that's what I told you before. Like former President Trump has some traits that may not the greatest. Humility is not maybe his strong point. But the thing is that the people who are pretending to be something and they're like totally the opposite, that's what you got to really watch out for. It's not the one that you see, okay, I'm a brash guy and I say what okay, so fine. So, yeah, it is. But the person's, oh, I'm so righteous. I don't know. It's like, yeah, you're not, and you're not fooling us anymore. And so that's crucial to understand and not to get stuck in it, to be able to see, to do what Nehemiah does here, which is to make your effort, but to realize that God's running the show, and your effort starts with acting right, doing the right thing, being the right person, being a good person, understanding that God has put you in this world to do something. If you can affect other people, fabulous. If they can't hear, they can't hear. What could you do? But that's what it's about. It's not about the people who think they're in charge, because they're going to be in for a big surprise in the end that they're not. Okay, so that is what Nehemiah says, and the king says to him, yes. And he goes and he gives him, the assistance. And he now has, how long is it going to be? Okay, and he gives him the pass to show the other people that he's going to have the rights from the king, and and all these type of things. And now what happens is the enemies of Israel, and this is also modern day politics. I don't know. I never read this book, but there's a book by Friedman. He was working in the State Department. He was the ambassador to Israel before. I didn't read the book. My brother told me that he revealed a lot of stuff. The State Department has been fighting very negative things. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, it's like, it's a funny business, because now there's no borders in America, and everyone comes in what it was. But when my parents were in the Holocaust and wanted to come into the country, they wouldn't let them. So I told you, my mother comes out of Auschwitz, and they're no, you can't come to America. And why? It's all these stories. Well, we get something not right here, where people, remember, and this is the same idea as the Nazis. And this is very important, because this is literally happening today. Literally, not. I mean, I hope it doesn't get to that point. But the bad people who claim certain things, the Nazis, before they started their extermination, they forbade shechita, ritual slaughtering of the animal, which was the least painful way of killing an animal, and yet they said it's cruel. The people that killed millions of people were coming with the guise that we are so righteous. That's an old story. That's an old story. And that's what happens here in verse 10. The enemies there, Sanballat, Tovia, these are big shots. They're big people within the government. And they do not like this. Okay? They are very nervous, and they want to stop this. Okay? Now, Nehemiah comes in chapter 2, he comes to Jerusalem, gets there, and he sees that you see how bad the shape of the walls are. And he doesn't tell people what he's going to do. He goes out at night, and he starts to test where the walls are broken. Because remember, I used to live in the old city. You see these ancient walls, and there are walls that surround. Today, we don't live in walled cities, but that was a central part of life. That you didn't have a wall around your city, you were in trouble. So he goes around checking and knocking down the parts of the wall that are not strong. He does that secretly so that they won't see it. No one's going to realize what he did. Then he goes and he gathers the people, and he says to them, "Listen, God has sent me," meaning that I have prayed to God for the success. He put favor in the eyes of the king for me, and he's given me the power to do it. And now I want us to rebuild the walls of the city. Okay? That is what happens in chapter 2. Okay, great. All right, questions. Oh, sorry, before that's when I get into chapter 2. And those are the enemies of the Jews here. They're very upset. And they say, what are you doing? You're rebelling against the king? Nehemiah answers, no, we are doing now what God had said. Okay? And again, he realized these guys are phonies, and says, "This is not for you." So he pushes them away and says, "You guys are not sincere." And okay, good. Questions on chapter 2.